Hello and welcome to the Self-Study Creating Your Development Plan webinar, part 1 of our accreditation series. My name is Marissa Gallegos and I work on the accreditation team here at NAFCC. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. For those of you who are first-time attendees, I just want to let you know that at any point during the webinar, if you want to ask a question, you do have a question box, and if everyone could take the chance right now to just comment their name and where they're from. That way I can make sure you can hear me okay. We can go ahead and get started once I see some more attendees trickle in and make sure that you can hear me. Alrighty, I have a Janiri Cullen from Florida. I hope I said your name right. Miranda Washington, hi Miranda. Sonia Tuck, hi. Barbara Mitchell's from Missouri. Susan Howard, Maryland. I'm doing great tonight. Thanks for asking. I've been fighting a cough for the past few weeks, so if I cough, I apologize in advance, but I'm doing well. Thank you. We have Tanya from Feffonmile. Is that how you say that? Huntsville? Or no, I'm sorry, that's your last name. Tanya Feffonmile from Huntsville. Annette Bishop from Tennessee. Okay, perfect. We got some more trickling in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. That way we start and end on time. Just like I said, if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to use that question box and I will do my best to answer promptly your questions as we go through the presentation. The goal of this webinar is to explain in more detail how to use your Benchmarks to Quality book and how that will help you to prepare for your application and observation. This webinar will also give you some ideas on how to show off all the hard work that you've been going through during the self-study phase of accreditation. So I hope that you enjoy the presentation. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Alrighty, to help us make it through our goal, to help you understand how to use your benchmarks to quality and prepare for your application and observation, we will be covering the following that we have here marked on the agenda. We will first walk through the Benchmarks to Quality book, which will end up taking the majority of our time. As we talk about the Benchmarks to Quality, it's important to understand the difference between standards and processes. So we will dive into that and what the differences between those two are. One of the most important processes that we'll talk about tonight is training. So we're going to cover that in detail. Though not a requirement, we will also discuss how to begin creating a professional portfolio if you haven't started one already. We hope that you take pride in all the hard work you will be doing through your accreditation, so we will take a moment to give you some ideas on how to show off your amazing program that you're creating or that you've already created. Finally, we'll briefly cover the rest of the webinar series that we hope you will attend to learn more about each of the steps of accreditation. So let's dive right in. If you participated in our self-study Q&A 2 weeks ago, you'll remember that we briefly spoke about the Benchmarks to Quality spiral-bound book that you have in your self-study kit. As a review, the Benchmarks to Quality divides all of the quality standards into 4 levels. Level 1 being the easiest of the standards to complete, and level 4 being the most difficult. Basically, it's your workbook that's going to help you make sure that you know and understand all of the standards required for accreditation. It will help you to measure your progress as you work on each standard, and it will also lay out for you the processes that you'll need to complete to prepare for your application and for your observation visit. For the majority of this webinar, I'm just going to go through the pages of this book. So I recommend if you have this book to go ahead and pull it out and have it in front of you. So as I go through the pages, you can follow along with me. You might be wondering if it's really necessary to go through the whole benchmarks book, especially if you have it in front of you and you feel like it's kind of big. We highly recommend that you do take full advantage of this tool. As I mentioned before, it's going to take you step by step through all of the standards and processes from easiest to hardest, and will help you make a plan on how to implement each of those standards. Before the Benchmark to Quality was created, many providers felt overwhelmed when starting self-study or trying to prepare for their application and weren't quite sure how to get started or basically how to get started because there were just so many standards. So NAFCC created this book in hopes of helping providers divide the work into manageable pieces. Before we dive into the book and talk about how to use it, I want to take a moment to define what a standard is versus what a process is, since both will be mentioned in the benchmarks to quality and you'll be working on both of them. The NAFCC standards are research and expert-based practices that will be the foundation of your high-level quality family child care program. Processes are actions that you will take to improve your professionalism and to prepare for your NAFCC application, observation, and help you maintain your accreditation once you have received it. These tend to be a little bit confusing, so we're going to cover them each in detail. We'll go ahead and start with the standards and then talk about processes. The NAFCC standards are practices or habits that you will need to implement into your program to become accredited. So just I want to say that one more time. NAFCC standards are practices or habits. They have been shown through peer-reviewed research to be the best in child care practices. The NAFCC standards are divided into 5 content areas: relationships, the environment, developmental learning activities, safety and health, and professional and business practices. I wanted to show you a couple examples of our standards and talk about the many good ways that we can implement the standards. So let's just read through these and then we can talk about them for a minute. My first example is an example of a relationship standard, and it reads: the provider recognizes signs of stress in children's behavior and responds with appropriate stress-reducing activities. Another example of a standard in our environment section would be: the arrangement of the home and use of space are balanced to meet the needs of both the child care program and the provider's family. And then one last example from our safety and health section is: infants under the age of 1 are placed on their backs for sleeping. As you can see, some of these standards are very straightforward and clear, such as standard 4.35, that infants are to sleep on their backs, while other standards will tend to be a little bit broader. Many providers get confused when they're given a broad standard and often call in to our office to ask exactly what they need to do to pass the standard. And the answer is that there are many good ways that you can meet the standard. I want to go ahead and practice and show you what I mean. Using your question boxes, go ahead and answer the question that I'm about to give you. How do you know when your children are stressed? Go ahead and answer in your box how you know they're stressed, and I'll share some of the answers that you give. So Barbara Mitchell says they start to cry. That's a good answer. Annette says they act out, they have tantrums, they withdraw. Susan says facial expressions, behavior. Sonia says, Sonia says they act out. Tamara, crying. Roseanne, whining, crying, throwing fits. Attitude, crying. Okay, perfect. Now I have another question for you. What do you do personally to help with those specific stressors that you mentioned? Okay, Barbara says she holds the children. Roseanne says she talks to the child, she comforts them. Tamara says give hugs and talk. Karine says reassure. Susan says talk, hug, try to determine the cause. Regina, know what they like to make them happy. That's a great answer. Janiri says, I ask her what we could do together to make her feel better. That's great. Give them love and support to calm them down. That's what Sonia said. Awesome. Those are all great answers. And as you can see, there are many types of stressors that children will feel, and there'll also be many types of coping mechanisms to deal with those stressful situations, because children are all different and providers are all different. Each of the examples and solutions that you came up with would qualify as meeting this standard, meeting standard 1.8. The provider recognizes signs of stress and then responds to that stressor. So I did this example just to kind of show that there is no one answer fits all in some of these standards. Many of the standards will be this way, that you'll just have to sit down and determine what is best for you, your program, and the children you take care of. Okay, so if you have your benchmarks to quality book, we're going to go ahead and open that up and go through some of the pages. If you open up to page 12, you will see a very brief overview of the numbered standards, which level they are placed in, and whether or not it is a required standard to meet. When you are eventually observed, you will need to meet the required standards 100%. We also call required standards star standards. So when we get deeper into the book, you'll see a little asterisk next to them. That just means that those are standards that the NAFCC Council has decided are the most important and must be met 100% of the time. All the other standards that don't have an asterisk or star next to them need to be met at least 90% complete to become accredited. So they're all important and we would like you to have them all, but if there's one or two that you don't meet, you're not going to fail your observation visit. Pages 12 through 18 will go through all the standards numerically. So it'll look just like what you see on the screen here. It'll go through each standard and let you know what level it is and then whether it is a required or a starred standard. Starting on page 23, you will see that the standards are now listed according to level and content area. So for example, page 23 starts the level 1 standards, starting with relationship standards. You will start here and work through each standard as you go through the book. So let me give you an example. Let's say we're starting from the very beginning. You're going to read to yourself standard 1.1. The provider cares about, respects, and is committed to helping each child develop his or her full potential. You will then, after reading that and thinking about it, decide whether or not you feel that that standard is not met or if it is fully met in your program. If it is not met, then you will put a check mark under the letters NM for not met. If you feel that it is fully met, then you'll put a check mark under FM for fully met. Then you will write down the date you made that decision and any thoughts of how you can improve on this standard. For example, let's say that you said not met for this standard. And then in the notes, you'll go ahead and write today's date, and then you might write something like, I put not met because I care and respect about all the children in my program except for Jimmy, because Jimmy is super active, he's really hard to control, I sometimes raise my voice at him when I shouldn't, and I don't dedicate as much time to him, or I don't enjoy his company as much as other children just because he's difficult to love. So that would be an example of not met, and you could write those notes down. At this point, you can decide whether you want to keep working through the rest of the standards, or if you want to just focus your energy on that one standard until you feel you've met it, and then come back to your benchmarks book. I usually recommend to providers that they quickly go through each page or section in checking off not met or fully met, and then they can go back and write your notes in and then work on that page or section until you feel they're fully met, and then work on the next page or section. But you can choose to work through the book in any way you like. That is just an example of how I usually explain to providers how to do it. Are there any questions about these pages and about how you would go through each of the standards and mark not met or fully met? Okay. This slide is just going to show you where each level starts and ends. So level 1 is pages 22 through 41, level 2 pages 42 through 54 in your benchmarks, level 3 is pages 55 through 69, and level 4 pages 70 through 83. As you can see, the majority of book will be these types of pages where you just sit down with yourself and do a self-evaluation of whether or not you feel that the standard is being fully met or not. Regina asks, should the level 1 let's see. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I just didn't understand your question. I had to reread it to myself. So she's asking if she needs to meet all of level 1 before she should move on to level 2. You can decide. That's what I recommend to providers, is they do it by level, just so they can feel that you can break it up into chunks and feel that you've accomplished something before you move on to the next section. 1, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself, and 2, it's just a little bit easier to do it that way, but you are more than welcome to skip around if you feel that that is better for you, but there's not any required way that you have to go through this book. I hope that answers your question, Regina. Before I move on to talk about processes, are there any other questions in regards to standards and filling out these sheets that we just briefly went over? It's not too hard. It's designed to be pretty self-explanatory, just doing the self-evaluation. And what I like about the book is that, as you can see, there's 2 columns here. So if you want to go through your first accreditation or even just work through it twice again at any point, there's multiple spots where you can go and reevaluate yourself all over again. Or if you take notes and need to write some more notes, there's more space. And then I think even in the back of the benchmarks, there's even extra pages if you need more space to write. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to write them down in the question box, but we're going to go ahead and move on to processes. Processes are actions that you will take to improve your professionalism and prepare for your NAFCC application, observation, and help you maintain your accreditation once you've received it. As opposed to standards, these will be very specific actions that you will need to take. So just as an easy thing to remember, the standards are broad and processes are specific. Tamara says you haven't received your packet. I know I sent your packet out just a couple days ago, so it's on its way, Tamara. Yes, it's on its way. So it'll probably take about a week or 2 to get to you. But yes, once you get it, then you can start following all this guidance that you're learning from the webinar tonight. Okay, so for example, an example of a process would be have a high school diploma or GED. That's something very specific that you need to accomplish before you can submit an application. Another example, design a quality improvement plan to meet all of the standards that you marked not met. So that's what we just talked about, going through the standards, writing a note down about how you're going to approve it, and then actually following through with your plan. Pages 19 through 22 list all of the processes, their levels, and have a comment box where you can leave notes. These are the only 3 pages in your benchmark books that will talk about processes, but they're very important. So make sure to read through those pages. You can work through them by level, or you can just take a look at all of them all at once and see what you need to work on. But these are very specific things that you will need to accomplish to help you prepare for the application. If you don't complete them all, then you might be submitting an incomplete application, or you might not be fully prepared for the observation visit. Now, I want to take the next few minutes to talk about the specific processes. One of the specific processes that becomes really important to your application later on when you are ready to submit it, which are the training hours. The benchmarks to quality will divide training up into 4 different processes. In your book, they're labeled as number 5, 10, 16, and 28. For your initial application, you will need to submit a total of 120 training hours. Each of the processes will divide the training into 30-hour chunks, so it doesn't feel so overwhelming when you're trying to get 120 hours in. These processes are the ones that are going to take the most of your time and the ones that are going to take the most planning. So I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about training and how you can find training and what trainings are accepted for your 120 training hour requirement for your application. Karine sent in a question. She says, I was told that I would receive an updated version as there were changes shortly after I received my package. Are you referring to the quality standards? We did have an update of quality standards back in 2017, but if you received a self-study kit after that, you would have all the updates that you need. But if you did have a self-study kit before 2017, you can find the new additions to the quality standards on our homepage, on our website, and just on the right-hand corner of our homepage, there's a little blue box that says quality standards with 2017 updates, and that's where you can find those. Is that what you're asking about, Kireen? Or was there something else that you felt was missing from your self-study kit? Go ahead and let me know, and then if there's more questions, I can talk to you afterwards. Oh, okay, perfect. I'm glad that answered your question. And then for anyone who's interested, if you did receive any self-study kit after 2017, everything is updated that you need. If you received it before 2017, the only thing that would be different is there were a few standard editions in 2017, and those standards can be found on our website. Okay, so let's go back to training hours. Like I said, you need a total of 120 training hours. The benchmark splits it up into 4 sections, so you can work level 1 is 30 hours, level 2 is another 30 hours, etc. So of those 120 hours, you can include a combination of the following: workshops of 2 hours or less, training sessions longer than 2 hours, classes or workshops that are taught by you, degrees from a university or college courses, continuing education units, and your initial family child care development associate. So I'm going to go through each of those in just a minute to give you a better description of those. But I do want to talk about, of those 120 training hours, you also must include at least 12 hours of at least 5 of these core competencies. The 7 core competencies that we look for in trainings that you submit are relationships, interactions and guidance, child growth and development, learning environments and curriculum, health, safety and nutrition, assessment and screening, special needs and inclusion, professional and business practices. So I know that this might start to sound a little overwhelming, just hearing the amount of hours that you have to get in and then all of these core competencies. But I can assure you that it isn't very difficult to meet these competencies because places that you'll go find trainings, there'll be a wide variety of the kinds of trainings that you can take. The reason we look for a good mix of these competencies is just to make sure that you're a good, well-rounded provider, making sure that you're getting a training in a variety of different things, and that you're not only taking classes in just relationships or classes in just special needs. We want to make sure that you are receiving training in a mix of all of these things. I have a question from Regina. How many hours in each column is required? For example, for the section relationship column, I have 24 hours. In total, I have 145 hours. Okay, so for training purposes, we are actually, you don't need to worry about the 5 competencies that we talked about for the standards and how those are divided. Those are just strictly for the standards. For training, this is where you want to have these 7 core competencies. So for each of these, you want about 12 hours. So for relationships, interactions, and guidance, you want about 12 hours. Child growth and development, another 12 hours. Learning environments curriculum, another 12 hours, and etc. So if you have a total of 145 hours, you're probably way good to go. And you probably already have a very good mix of all of these core competencies. But if you're worried about it, in our training log, it has a way that you can organize it into these competencies. That way you can see where all your trainings are in this mix. Yes, Regina. Regina asked if that's in 3 years. So yes, we will only accept trainings that are younger than 3 years unless it is a degree. So if you received an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or master's degree, and it was a little bit longer than that, degrees are infinite in life, so we'll always count those. Alrighty, so now we're going to go ahead and go through each of the types of trainings you can submit and just talk a little bit more about that. So you can submit trainings that are less than 2 hours. So if you go and take a training that's 1 hour or half an hour or 2 hours, you can submit those no matter where you get them from, but there is a limit up to 28 hours. And that is just because we want to make sure that you're taking good, long quality trainings. The next kind of training is over 2 hours. So anything that's over 2 hours, there is unlimited amount of that kind of training you can submit to us. When you submit training that is either less than 2 hours or more than 2 hours, you will need to submit in your application some kind of proof of attendance, whether that be a certificate stating the day you took it and the amount of hours you received for taking the class, or if it's a college transcript, or if you took, like at a conference setting and you took a bunch of classes, If you have stickers like we do at the NAFCC conferences, like a sticker sheet, or if you have a sheet where someone signs it for you to prove that you took the class, that's another way you can show and prove that you indeed took that training. Sometimes people like to send in receipts. Receipts don't always work because it shows that you paid for it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you attended. So we need to make sure that you send a certificate or a transcript. Cureen asks, training certificates must state the number of hours on them. Can we get a letter stating the hours? Yes. So if for some reason you didn't get a certificate or are unsure if the hours stated are clear, you can receive a letter from the instructor or from the organization that taught the class. And yes, a letter would be fine as long as it states the date that you took it and the amount of hours that the class was. That was a good question. Thank you. Okay, another way you can submit training is if you yourself taught the training. We do limit these to 18 hours, and you can only submit each class you teach once. So if you teach an art class like 5 times a month, you can only submit the one time you taught since it's the same exact class. If you decide to submit any of these hours, you will want to submit a description of that class you taught with the date and time that you taught it, and then some sort of proof that someone attended, like a sign-in sheet, and then that's how we'll go ahead and count those. Okay, degrees. You can submit college degrees that you've earned as hours towards accreditation. You can submit a master's in early childhood education, child development, or a related field from an accredited college or university. For master's degrees, we count that as 45% of your required training hours, which ends up equaling 54 training hours. Bachelor's degrees, the same. You can submit a bachelor in early childhood education, child development, or a related field, and that will equal 35% of your training hours, which equals out to 42 hours. Associates in early childhood education, child development, or a related field can be submitted up to 25% of training hours, which equals 30. And then if you have a bachelor's that's unrelated, so like in accounting or something, you can also submit those and it will just be counted for 15% of your required training hours, which equals 18 hours. If you're going to submit a degree, please submit a copy of your transcript. It doesn't need to be an official copy, but submit a copy of your transcript or of your actual degree. And that way we can count those hours towards your 120 training hour requirement. Audrey asks, what if you took a child development class? That's what we're about to talk about right now with college courses. So I'll get back to your question in just a second, Audrey. Tanya asks, a master's in social work will fall under the 54 hours or not? Yes, I would consider that being in a related field. So yes, you could submit that for your master's. If I don't think anyone would give you trouble here in the office for that. So yeah, you can go ahead and submit that. Okay, so Audrey, to get back to your question, if you're taking a class in child development, I'm assuming you're probably taking it through a local college or through a CEU class, and so that's what we're about to talk about right now. So if you are currently enrolled in college courses, a semester course, we count up to 45 hours. So if you take a class, let me think of an example, like infant development, and it was a 3-unit class, that would equal 45 hours. If you took a class in middle childhood development and it was only a 1-unit class, then it would be 15 hours. So every unit in a semester is 15 hours. Most classes in the college, at a college or university will be 3-unit classes once you get into the higher child development courses, so that will equal up to 45 hours. If you take a quarter class, those are only worth 10 hours a unit, so if you took a 3-unit class, that would equal 30 hours. Okay, I got some questions in. Tamara Red asks, a master's in public administration. I've never had anyone submit a master's of public administration. I might have to ask our accreditation manager about that one. I would probably lean towards no, but we would no as in for the total 54 hours, but I'm sure we could at least do the 18 hours and maybe more. But if you want to submit that one in, Tamara, I would send a quick email to Alicia Platt, and I'll have her contact information at the end of the webinar, because I do not know the answer to that question. Suzanne Howard asks, a unit equals a credit? Yes. So if you have a class that is for 3 credits, it's the same as 3 units, yes. Audrey asks, what if you took it 5 years ago? I have an AA in child development, so that means I have 30 hours. Yes, so like I said, with degrees, you can submit your degree and it's of an infinite life. So if you have an AA, let me just go back, an associate's related in child development, then that would be 30 hours. But for college courses, they do have to be no older than 3 years. So if you haven't quite finished your degree, or if you just like taking classes for fun on the side, then they would have to be no older than 3 years old. And the reason we do that is because education and child development changes so often with research that we find. So we want to make sure that the information and training you're receiving is accurate and up to date. Regina asks, it's one of the questions got mushed, I think. Let me just make sure I get it right. Does that mean I only need to submit 90 hours of training? Can I submit a training list from the Oklahoma Professional Development Registry? It keeps track of all my workshops. Okay. Oh, I see. That was Regina. Okay, that was your big question. It was all one. Okay, so yes, if you have an AA in child development, that would count for 30 hours, so you'd only need an extra 90 hours. Yes. For the other question, can you submit an Oklahoma Professional Development Registry? Yes. Lots of states will have different professional development registries, and if you submit that, that is totally fine. We count that as a transcript. Just make sure that it's very clear that you have the dates and the hours received on those registries, and they usually do. They're usually very well organized. And then also we're about to talk about CEUs. So if in your registries, make sure that it mentions whether if it's a CEU or a college course. But if you're submitting a college course, it will usually be with its own individual college transcript. So CEUs are continuing education units. What that means is that a class, if it offers CEUs, means that it comes from either an accredited organization, or it comes from an accredited or certified or trained individual. So these tend to be trainings that will either cost you money or maybe a little bit more expensive than regular trainings, just because it is taught by an accredited or certified person. And so these are really good training hours to find. These are kind of written funny on transcripts. It will say 0.01 sometimes on those transcripts, and that's equal to 1 CEU hour. Sometimes I get providers confused and think, oh my gosh, I don't want to take those because it's only 0.1 or 0.01 hours, and it really is 1 hour. It's not like 10 minutes of an hour, but it's a full hour. On those transcripts as well, if you take a class or you're looking online trying to find a CEU class and it says 1, that usually will equal 10 CEU hours. So those are really great classes to take, and we'll count an infinite amount of those. And this is exempt from the 2-hour workshop limit of 28 hours. So if you have a CEU class that's only 1 hour, you can take as many 1-hour CEU classes as you want, because they are trainings coming from an accredited person or organization. And then the last item that we'll accept for your 120-hour training requirement is the CDA. We only accept the initial family child care CDA, not the renewal. So just be careful with that. If you want to submit a CDA, it has to be the initial for it to be counted. And that's just because of our 3-year exception, that it has to be within the 3 years. Okay, there are more processes than just training, but it's the most grueling process that you'll work on during your self-study and benchmarks to quality book. and it's going to take up the most of your time and energy and possibly money. So I wanted to cover that, all that information with you, and it's because it's one of the most frequently asked questions by providers. Just as a reminder, all of the processes can be found on pages 19 through 22, and there is some more information about training in your benchmarks as well as in your provider guide if you have more questions. But before we move on, are there any other questions in regards to processes or in regards to training? Barbara asks, is the 120 hours only for initial application? How many does renewal? Okay, yes, that's a good question. 120 hours is only for the initial application. Once you become re-accredited, meaning you've had your accreditation for 3 years and you want to become accredited again and you're submitting your application for the second, third, or fourth time, then the requirement is only 90 hours. However, in that 90 hours, 45 of those need to be CEU credits. So remember when we talked about, I'll go back, when we talked about continuing education units, 45 of those will need to be either CEUs, college courses, or degree hours. And the reasoning for that, for reaccreditation, is because we want reaccredited providers to be taking high-level training courses and to be taking courses from accredited programs or accredited certified teachers and instructors. So for most of you, I'm assuming, are probably initial applicants, so it'll be 120 hours, and it can be a mix of any of the training topics we've talked about. If you're reaccrediting, it's only 90 hours, but there is the 45 hours that does need to be CEUs or college courses. Roseanne asked, these webinars count, right? Yes, these webinars, we send out an email the next day that has proof that you took this course, and then you would just resubmit that email you would print out that email or scan that email to us when you're going to submit your application, and we do count these hours. If you do need a specific certificate for your professional portfolio or for other purposes, you can request that as well, and I make you certificates. Okay, Regina asks, I converted your NAFCC accreditation training record into a spreadsheet because it's a lot easier to type. It looks almost exactly the same. Will it be turned away? No, you can go ahead and use that. We have that training log as a benefit and help to you. If it's not helpful to you, you can modify it and send it in whatever way is easier for you, or if you're just submitting transcripts, you can just submit that. We have that for you so you can lay out everything nice and neat to see how many of each of the processes, training sections you have, and so you can see how many of the core competencies you have. So yeah, if you needed to modify that at all, Regina, that's totally fine. We're not going to turn away your application if you submit it on a different training form. Alrighty, are there any other questions in regards to standards or in regards to processes or in regards to the benchmark to quality in general? Okay, we're going to talk about something a little bit fun. I want to briefly talk about your professional portfolio. Having a professional portfolio is not a requirement for NAFCC accreditation. However, if you're going to be working on such a huge project like self-studying accreditation, implementing all of the standards and processes into your program, it's a great idea and a great time to start working on your professional portfolio if you haven't already. What a professional portfolio is, it's a compilation of information about your program, experiences you have had as a child care provider or a child educator, and other data that you might have that can give a visual picture of what your program is. It's a chance to show off your program's changes over time and highlight what you've accomplished during your time as a child care provider. It's also a great tool that you can use to show off to parents and to potential clients that are coming to visit your program. There are many things that you could include in a professional portfolio. These are just some ideas. You may want to include a personal philosophy or written narratives. That is just basically like a little description of why your child care it is the way it is, or written stories about things that have happened in your program. You can include before and after pictures or photographs. So if I know there's some standards that talk about the environment, whether it's indoors or outdoors. So if you end up redesigning your child care program in order to meet a standard, you could take before and after pictures and have that in your portfolio. You can have samples of your children's work in your program. If they've created a noodle paper or arts and crafts project, you can include that in your portfolio. Descriptions of your program and anything that will show up how unique your specific program is. Because portfolios are so unique to the individual, it's hard to tell you exactly how your portfolio should be or how it should look. But if you're looking for some more information about portfolios or some more ideas, you can review pages 124 through 150 of your provider guide for some more information and ideas on that. The next couple slides I'm going to show you are just some examples that I found on Pinterest to give you a little bit of idea of maybe something you can do. So I liked this example. It showed on the right-hand side, it has some of her care children working on a little project. And with this project, she could explain, oh, we're working on fine motor skills and working on helping children understand textures and feelings, or whatever description she wanted to put on that. So it's a nice little visual that you and parents can see, and you can also explain what emotional and physical and cognitive benefits there are to certain activities that you're doing in your program. And then here on the left-hand side, she just has a brief description of what they do during the day, maybe some activities that children enjoy doing, yeah, just some ideas of some of the things that they do in their program and what they're learning throughout the day and what kind of benefits there are to the activities they're doing. Like she talks about helping with eye-hand coordination, fine motor skills, by making necklaces and things like that. So that is one idea of something you might want to put in a portfolio. This is another idea. This would be considered maybe like a narrative or a description of something that you do in your program. So in this person's portfolio, they said they like to teach their children how to cook. And so why do they teach their children how to cook? It improves their motor skills and coordination. It helps to create bonding experience between children as well as family members when they take that home to go help mommy or daddy cook in the kitchen. And it helps to teach them math and science, things like that. So if you can take the different elements of your program and activities of your program and then prove how it's being a benefit to them cognitively or emotionally, that's a great way that you can show off something in your portfolio. And then here on the left-hand side, they talk about different types of play that they do in their program. Before I move on, I just wanted to ask if anyone has started a portfolio or if someone's thought about making a portfolio or if even they have an online portfolio, whether that be through Instagram or Facebook or something physical, a blog. I'd love to hear your ideas. You can share those with us throughout the rest of the webinar if you'd like, and I'll share those ideas if anyone has them. Alrighty, so that's all I have to mention about portfolios and about the benchmarks to quality. The next part of your self-study kit is the provider guide, and in the provider guide, it's just a bunch of loose leaf papers that's pretty thick. And because there's so much information in the provider guide, we can't cover all of that information in just one webinar, and so we've created a webinar series to talk about the other main points of the provider guide. So today we covered the self-study part 1. So we talked about the main chunk of self-study, which is the benchmark and working on training. Every 2 weeks, we have a webinar that is presented. And so in 2 weeks, we'll have part 2, which we'll talk and cover about the application. 2 weeks after that, we'll have a webinar about the observation and how to prepare and feel comfortable for that. And then 2 weeks after that, there'll be a webinar about updates and how to maintain your accreditation through the update. If you are interested in participating in these webinars, if you've read through the provider guide and you're still confused about how to prepare for these things or how to do them, you can visit our website at nafcc.org/accreditation webinars, and that's where you can find all of our registration links to all of these different parts of our webinar series. Also, I do send out emails the day of the webinar, so that's probably how most of you heard about this webinar, is receiving it through your email or seeing it on Facebook. That way, those are ways that you can find out about these webinars as well. So that is the webinar for tonight. I just wanted to take another minute to see if there were any other questions, whether it be about standards, processes, trainings, professional portfolio, or anything in regards to self-study and getting ready and how that's supposed to help you prepare for the application and observation. Annette says, in my provider guide, there's a tab for family records. I know parents submit surveys, but is something else needed regarding families in care for the family records section? So for family records, you can choose to, I know that most providers will put background checks there. I know there's a tab for background checks, but if there was too much stuff in there, or if you wanted to keep it more organized, I know lots of providers like to put the background checks for their children, their older children, or their husband or wife in there, and that's what they use those tabs for. You can also put parent surveys there, or you can put your family records of, like, not your family, but the families of the children that you're taking care of. Those records you can put in there. It's all up to you. There isn't a specific purpose for each of the tabs. Like, you have to specifically put something in there. It's just however you want to use it. But yeah, that would probably be a great thing to put in that family's records, is the parent surveys that you receive, or special information about the families that you're taking care of if you don't already have a separate binder for that. Tara says, is it possible for me to get an updated self-study? When did you last purchase a self-study, Tara? If it's been a few years, then yes, you would probably want to purchase a new one. The self-study kit does cost $315, and that includes the physical kit, which includes the benchmarks that we talked about today, the provider guide, and a few other booklets in there. And it will also include an e-self-study portal. So if you do have a self-study that's outdated by, like, older than 2015, then yeah, it might be a benefit to you to purchase a new one if that's something you're interested in. If it's only been a few years, Tara, the only difference that there would be is that there's going to be some new standards, like I mentioned, and I guess I'll show everyone right now because that seems to be a popular question. I'll go into to our website so I can show you how to find the updated standards, and if the updated standards list is enough for you, then that might be enough. But if you're feeling like you need a new benchmarks book, you can purchase just the benchmarks for $35, or if you want the whole self-study kit, then you can purchase it for $315. You would just either need to call me or email me, and I can help you get set up with that. And on our next slide, I'll have all of my contact information. Okay, Karine says, I'm about to join a cohort of providers interested in NAFCC. Can they join the webinars too? Yes, these webinars are open to everyone, accredited or not. So yeah, feel free to welcome them and show them our website so that they can find those. And I'll show that to you right now, where to find everything. Okay, Janeri says, I have my Florida Child Care Professional credential since 2016. I have to do all these courses again and the portfolio as well. So if there are any, so I guess if you were to submit your application today, anything that would be, what's today, the 16th, 19th. So anything that is in September of 2016 and forward, you could go ahead and submit for training. but anything earlier than September 2016, you wouldn't be able to submit. So you can submit your credentials if there were classes associated to get that credential, and we could count those training hours. So yes and no to your question, I guess. So if it's older than September, if you were to submit it today, then I could count partial hours on there. And then for your portfolio, yeah, just keep working on that. You don't have to start over. If you've already got one, just continue to add to it. Tara asked, I submitted my application in 2017, haven't heard from anyone till I called. I was told to resubmit. Yeah, I'll write your name down, Tara, and I'll give you a call tomorrow, and we can see what we need to do in regards to your application. It's possible that there was something missing and we had tried to make contact with you and maybe had some bad contact information or just played a lot of phone tag or something. So yeah, I wrote your name down and I'll give you a call tomorrow. Alexis Smith, I know that we can use our associate's degree. My question is a time limit on them. No, there is no time limit on associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, or master's degrees. So even if you got it 20 or 30 years ago, we'll still count it as long as it is childcare related. For the bachelor's or master's, if they're unassociated, it's 18 hours. Yes. And then Janeri, you say if I can send you the information to your email. I'm sorry, I don't know if I understand what information you would like. Would you like a transcript of this PowerPoint? I could do that. I'll be submitting that to our Facebook page, which I'll be showing you in just a minute. Or if you want an email of this presentation, I can do that as well, if that's what you're asking. Alrighty, so this is our contact information for everyone on the accreditation team. If you need to reach out to any of us, this is our information. I'll just give you guys a minute to look at that and write down anything that you need. Otherwise, you can find it on our website. And then in just a minute, I'm going to go out of this and show you on our website how to find the quality standards, the updated quality standards, and then I'll show you our webinar page. That way you can find both of those if you're interested. Okay, Alexis asks, it's an associate in child development. Yes, so Alexis, for your associates in child development, let me go back, because I forget to, because there's just so many things to remember. Oh, there it was. So for your associates in child development, you would get 30 hours of training. Alrighty, let me go back to our contact information for just a minute, just in case anybody needed that. Another part of a way that you can find some more information, or if you want to learn more about the standards, or you have more questions, a great resource to you is the NAFCC Accreditation Candidates in Process page. This is a page for everyone who is either accredited or is working on their accreditation. It's a great page to be mentored or to ask your questions or to just express your nervousness about what's going on in self-study. I navigate and run that page, and then we have other accredited providers who help answer questions on there, so that's a great resource to you. Alrighty, let me come out of the presentation for just a minute, and then I'm going to bring this over here. I'm going to show you our website. So here on our website, there is here on the top. Oh, well, let me start with this. So on our homepage, if you need to see the quality standards, if you're worried that you don't have an updated version of the benchmarks, or worried that you don't have the updated standards, right here on the bottom right-hand corner in this blue box, there's the NAFCC Accreditation Quality Standards with 2017 updates. This will have all of the standards written numerically in order, divided into the content areas that we talked about. So you can visit all of them here. The only difference between this page and what the benchmarks is that the benchmarks organizes it, obviously, as I showed you, in a workbook fashion, from level to easiest to hardest. So if you feel that you need an actual workbook, then you can either purchase the self-study kit or the benchmark book itself if you feel like you need some more help if you don't already have a self-study kit. Jantilia asks, is it possible I could get credit for my associate and bachelor's in early child care? Yes, submit your transcripts for your associate or for your bachelor's, whichever is latest, so your bachelor's degree, and we'll count your bachelor's degree towards training hours. Okay, so back to this page. If you go to our accreditation tab and scroll down, third one down, achieving and maintaining accreditation, it'll have these two options pop up. This one is the NAFCC training policy. So if you forget anything we've talked about tonight, everything I talked about in regards to training is on that page. Oops. And then here on the accreditation webinars, this is where you can find all the information about our new webinar series. So here is the registration link that you registered to tonight. So if you want to register for part 2, 3, and 4, those are those right there. You can register. These are all the registration links till the end of the year. And then when next year starts, I'll go ahead and refresh this page with the new registration links for next year. And then if this is something you're interested in, this is a webinar that's a part. This talks specifically about the most missed standards in the observation visit, and we talk specifically about lots of different standards, so you can apply or register to those as well. Alrighty, so I am going to be closing the webinar in just a minute unless there are any other last questions. And I do just want to go ahead and say thank you to everybody who's attended and participated. I really appreciate that you come out to these. Like I said, these are brand new webinars that we've developed, and so we hope that you enjoy them. And if there's any feedback that you'd like to give us, please let us know what we can include, what we can do better. We'd love to hear your feedback, and we appreciate your attendance. Alrighty, thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody. And be sure to call or email me if you have any other questions, or to visit us on our NAFCC Accreditation Candidates in Process page. Have a great night.